Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Decloaked podcast. And today, my special guest is Samuel English-Kershaw. And Samuel will be running us through a brief overview of his career, some challenges that he's faced within the industry, his specialist topic that needs some relevance, and the one thing in cyber that you think is bullshit, Samuel, and what we need to focus on or needs to change. So, over to you, Samuel.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. So I'm Samuel. I work as the head of information security for a disruptive energy company called Ampex. So we can touch on that later if it's more relevant. I've spent 10 years working in InfoSec. I've done everything from technical pre-sales through to consultancy, through to in-house security work and engineering. I did a brief stint in sales itself, thinking that might be fun, and it wasn't. So I went back into technical work. So I've kind of seen all sides of cyber, I think, and crammed quite a lot into, I would say, a relatively short space of time, but I suppose 10-ish years is not that short a time, is it? So
I know. And I think, Samuel, earlier we were talking about how we actually come across each other's paths. I can't even remember if it was through an audit route. Was it sales? I can't even remember. I mean, I think we meet so many people in the industry, and then we're just like, how did we actually get to meet? And as you were saying, there's been so many times we've nearly crossed paths again. And so to put that aside, it's really good to see you. And thanks again for being on the pod. So challenges that you have faced in the industry. So again, that can be professionally or personally. It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, I think there's a couple really. So I've been really lucky that I've not faced any of the systemic challenges. I think the big challenge I would probably say would be job market and constant sort of talk around, or one thing that I find a bit vexing is constant talk around skills gap, shortages, getting people in. I think getting into the industry, it was more about getting a chance, if that makes sense. Like you come in, you've got a university degree, perhaps, maybe you don't, but you've got the skills, you've maybe done some courses. I found that pretty challenging and pretty frustrating because, I mean, this is going back to kind of 2010-ish, it took me about 2 years to get into the industry while people were screaming that there's not enough people in the industry. And that's with a background and that's with some admittedly at the time, low level, but technical expertise. And then the other thing I would say was, as I've sort of progressed through that, I think is finding appropriate mentors to help with the general stress, fatigue, and essentially the general, I hate the phrase, but like burnout that comes with the roles as you get more and more senior, and that feeling that essentially the crunch point is you. I think that's a challenge, and it's, there's nothing I've done to solve that, but I think it's something that's worth calling out and finding out what their experience is, because I think the more you share that kind of stuff, the better it is for everyone further down the track and for your peers as well. So they would be the two, I'd say.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned trying to get into the industry. We see it every single day in LinkedIn. And what I like is if we have a really good community, people are always constantly offering tips. But again, if you've got, you said a degree, you've had some industry experience, I kind of feel more now that people trying to break into the industry need to do more than that. They need to have, a good LinkedIn profile. They need to be working on side projects. They kind of almost feel like they need to market themselves because there is such competition. Whereas you could go to like countries like Australia or the UAE, and they'll literally they'll have a couple of conversations, and then next thing you know, you have a visa. And so I'm kind of interested in your point of view.
I think what I find frustrating about it is the double standard, and it's not aimed like anywhere specific, but I think you're definitely right. There's a lot more. There's a lot more you need to do, I think, to get in. And I think on both the non-technical and the technical side of the industry, depending on which route you're immediately wanting to take, that's too binary. It's set out as you're immediately technical or not. So you see people saying, well, what can this person with a geography degree do for me? They don't know anything. And it's like, well, I'm not even sure if, for what it's worth, a degree is that relevant, but say someone comes in with you with that, you sort of think, well, it's incumbent on you to train them up. And if they're wanting a super, super specific technical role, then you're probably better off looking at somebody with a different background. But that doesn't mean that person shouldn't be able to come in, maybe do some audit and assurance work for you, build up that way, work on those skills on the side. And I think that goes kind of across the board. It's, you always see the 4 million people needed by next week. But then equally you see job specs come out and it's like, oh, I'm looking for a junior security person. Role is basically to keep the lights on, give us a hand around the place. And there's probably 7 or 8 things you could get them doing, whether it's, essentially teaching people basics of like asset management, risk management, things like that, where they could then just get hands-on with project teams and begin working on technical skills on the side. But it's like immediately you need 3 years experience X, whether it's maintaining your own project on the side. For people that have done technical degrees, right, they're probably going to have that. It's a fairly low bar. But if you've got someone saying, hey, I'm interested in cybersecurity, I want to pivot from another sector in, I actually don't know how you do that now, because immediately it's, do you understand these fundamental concepts? Yeah, you can get a bit of an academic, you could do some reading around the side or whatever. But to your point, that's not getting you, in my opinion, that's flat not getting you an interview anymore. So it's kind of like you're either accepting people who are going to bullshit you on their knowledge and they come in, or you get people earnestly saying, I don't know about this, but I know A, B, C, D, and I'm really interested to learn. And anecdotally, my experience is the people that are very capable, very interested are the people that are not getting through the door, because they just do not have they're just, for some reason, the hiring process in seemingly every organization is just wrong. It's not getting people in.
I'm starting to see some companies take an approach where they'll actually give feedback and also like a career roadmap.
Yeah.
I think I saw an advertisement recently of it, and this was an American company. I thought that was pretty cool, because they were like, hey, you're obviously not qualified, you're too junior, but if you did X, Y, Z. And one of the things was like, I think it was like, I don't know, a SOC analyst. And it's like, well,
yeah.
how do you, unless you go through like a graduate scheme, it's like, how does that become a viable option? And this person was like, right, I'm going to document this. They put it in YouTube, and they were like, this is the rejection I got. This is the pathway they gave me, because a lot of people don't understand that education. They don't understand that if you want to go for a certain role, there's certain multiple different paths and different approaches. This person basically, they built an elevator pitch. They built their own home lab. I think they used multiple different sim tools. They were learning some Python projects, PowerShell, and then they built a Medium blog, and it was like one of the best things I'd seen. And I was like, the irony is they actually put in a bit of work for 6 months, and they're kind of gaining that experience. But unless people tell them or say, here's the pathway or the roadmap, it's very difficult. But again, I think organizations struggle with the stress of, we just can't nurture someone or take them on. But it's like, you can't get a junior person. You're obviously going to be limited based on salary. And it's like, well, how do you then kind of usher that in? And I think that's always going to be a conundrum for people. And then you'll see other folk, especially in like e-commerce, daily fantasy sports. I won't name anyone, but they're like huge. They're like, listen, come in for a month, we'll give you some experience, an extra pair of hands, and that is worth its weight in gold. But again, I see some job specs and I just laugh at them. I'm like, 15 years Kubernetes experience. And I'm like, this is just wild. The person's like 17, 18. It's like, this is crazy. Or you'll get like people who go down the non-ethical hacking route, get themselves in trouble, and then they'll be maybe neurodiverse and not understand that there's certain rules, there's certain pathways, or being able to utilize or someone mentor them to say, hey, if you go down this path, it's wrong. That if you focus your energy here, you can get, I don't know, certified ethical hacker, OSCP, and then that kind of builds the pathway. But not everyone can afford those certifications. So
yeah, I think that's the other thing. I think it's like the focus on certs kind of bugs me, because it's, you sort of need them, and I don't necessarily have a problem with them, but I feel like it should be essentially like, to put it bluntly, like more of a corporate sponsored thing, but it seems to be the minimum baseline now. If someone comes along with like a great kind of like a Try Hack Me account or something, people seem to be like, oh yeah, cool, but like, you also still need this. And it's like, to your point there, like if you're on the younger end of the spectrum and you've got, you've got an interest and you've paid your 100 and whatever quid it is for a Try Hack Me account, you think, well, that's about the limit I would expect someone of that age to have in terms of resources available to them, right? So I think it's maybe just about being a bit more open about what we're expecting from especially from the entry level sort of side of things. And then to your point about nurturing people, I think that's the big sort of crux issue as well, isn't it? If you sometimes getting people in through the door, and then there's just essentially nothing for them. They're in an under-resourced team. Totally get it. They're really stretched, but they're not really getting anything. Like I found it quite sort of staggering, the lack of resources available when I first got into places. It was just like, hey, you've come in, you've got a project assigned to you, just crack on with that now. And you sort of think, well, that's great. I'm lucky enough to have some background, but you sort of think, well, I've got sink or swim is maybe a good thing, but it's also like if there's just no support, you're sort of left to find your own way through, which is great if it works here, and it's pretty crap if it doesn't, right? You're just left there. So one of the things we tried to do, or I've tried to do in my last few roles, is just create a handbook of basically, this is stuff I know. This is how you could also, this is also how you could, learn it, do whatever. These are some other resources. Just basically have a crack and check in monthly with how people are getting on. But even that's, let's be frank, like that's on the side of the formal sort of process, but it's at least building up and passing some stuff on. I think there's sometimes a bit of chat to peers or whatever, and sort of like an arrogant assumption of, well, how does person X not know this? It's like, well, you've never told them. They have no idea. They're 21 at most. Like, they have no idea.
And that even expands into like even people who have been a 10-year engineer, 10-year developer when it comes to security principles or vulnerability management.
Yeah.
And it's like, we had a situation recently where someone was a bit embarrassed to post in a Slack channel to say, what does patching mean? Like, what do I need to do? And I'm like, you forget about these things. It's like, well, if people aren't taught, then they're not inherently just going to crack on. And that's where sometimes, that arrogance comes in, especially with it's, a senior leader, or it's like even hiring. And, you kind of look at that again, some of the profiles I've seen when hiring, I remember one time we interviewed someone with 6, I think it was ISACA, ISC Square, but their practical application of the knowledge was, they had a photographic memory by the sounds of it, but it was like, but they would be absolutely useless if, the proverbial shit hits the fan. And it's like, well, right, okay. Then we had someone who was like, I left school at 16. I've been spending the past 3 years. Here's my repos, here's my YouTube channel. We were like, oh, wow, why have you never got a cert? Because it always comes up. And they're like, just because I just couldn't be bothered.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no shame in that. But yeah.
No, I'm definitely with you. And I think that's the thing, like the myopic focus on certs does create problems, I think, because it also creates the perception, I think. Because I've had some friends say to me over the years, I'd be interested in getting cybersecurity, but like, I don't have the desire to spend £7,000 or whatever it is on a cert to potentially not get a job. And would it even help me get a job? I really like the YouTube thing. You've referenced that. Obviously, a couple of people have said, I think that would really stick in. And I think, if there's somebody sort of watching this thinking, oh, how would I break in? I think if somebody dropped me a decent repo, some interesting side project on a YouTube, even if it's got, I don't care about the views. It's more just to your point there about like the application or the explanation of what they've done. I'm not expecting them to be, subscribing up to the eyeballs and thinking, oh, brilliant. But that would be cool and resonate, I think. But yeah, I think it's just interesting that wider conversation, because it is, to your point about the patching as well. I kind of love that, because when a couple of roles ago, when I joined, the security team was sending out these really super technical notices to development teams, thinking like, well, they're developers, right? So they'll get it, they'll know what's going on, they'll understand why. And then when we sort of, long story short, like a long tail of historic issues that we were picking up, that's kind of like, well, why hasn't this been fixed? And the common thing was, will we get this notice through saying, hey, devs, everything is wrong? And then a really long explanation of some CV we don't quite understand. And there's not really any actionable thing at the end of it, other than do some patching, or, and then it's the actionable insight is too vague. It's just like, you need to patch the systems, you need to, and they were still, to your point there, they were at that level of like, they weren't quite at like, well, what's patching? But they were sort of like, well, I don't know how. I'm responsible. I'm the owner for this system in this business, but I don't really. I'll chuck it in the backlog and I'll get to it when I get to it. There wasn't really any sense of collaboration or
exactly. And I think it goes a long way. I hate the term holding hands, right, or hand holding, whatever. It goes a long way though when you build that confidence in people, and you're like, hey, actually, you just need to update this package, or do this to this library, whatever, and they're like, oh, great. And it's like, actually, you've helped us save, or you've mitigated this massive, big, huge problem, making people part of that. And circling back into the certs thing, we were actually asked this at a conference recently. I think it was a C-Vision conference, and someone was saying, why do we always ask for certs? I believe part of it is, depending on which country you operate in, there's a kind of confidence level, and also within like ISO certifications, you need to prove the competency of certain people. But insurance, I've been going through recent insurance items, and I think it was asked in 3 or 4 sections. And I'm like, You know, like maybe I'm in the wrong industry. Maybe I should just be the other side of the insurance, just like help and write these questionnaires and be
Yeah,
like.
some of those questionnaires are horrible, aren't they? Yeah.
But anyway, so that's I like that. We kind of went in a mirage of we went in a good tangent there, which is good. So let me just see the one topic then that you wanted to discuss that needs relevance and clearing up within the industry.
Yeah, so the one I've gone for is penetration testing, but I'll focus in on the penetration testing for while we're, for the purposes of this. But I think broadly, vulnerability management as a whole and some of the solutions to the problems that we all face with that just need clearing up. So I think technically, internally, security teams generally know what they're doing, but where I think we've gone, sort of really, I don't know whether it's I've never quite worked out whether it's vendor led or whether it is company led, but it's just the quality of pen test report and what is in there versus what your business needs. I think the delta there is absolutely huge. And there's obviously some problems that are fairly like low level, which I'll sort of, we can have a chat about, but I think everyone would know, the point in time, limit scope, does it give you a false sense of security, all that kind of stuff. But some of the conversations I have with pen test vendors, I get the feeling that they're just out to lunch. The console is mega technical, but as soon as you get into scenario based, kind of like, hey, I don't just want to learn every problem with this web app. I need something that's actually actionable for the business. Or every company claims to be scenario based, blah blah, and then you just get a essentially meaningless report where I would basically need someone with the skills of the most elite hacker on earth to already be in my business to perform this, and it's a critical, and it's suddenly everything's popping off with your C-suite saying why we got all these whatevers, and that's not an example of from my current employer, I should say, but it's I think the industry there is ripe for a reset around what we're doing, why are we doing it, how are we doing it, what's the point of this, and fundamentally it would help a lot, I think, if the vendors themselves were better instructing their commercial teams on, on what the purpose of this is. Because quite often, you'll get your usual sales pitches or whatever, and will help you meet compliance, will basically stop the hackers before you do, and it's kind of like none of it's quite right, but everybody's paying 1,500 quid a day for it seems, and maybe £1,000 if you can get a discount. And you just think this is nuts. So that's what I'd kind of like to harp on about for a bit.
And I think, really good point, scope. I've been on some projects and someone has defined a scope and it's been absolutely miles off it in terms of maybe they don't understand the actual platform, application, or whatever you're trying to test, and they don't understand pen testing. I've even seen vendors pitch it like a security audit. And I mean, if you're picking an audit, then are you going to be sampling stuff? Are you going to be literally going under the bonnet of everything we have in the company? Scope is so important because, what are you trying to achieve, right? Do you want a full red team when it's just like, we're just going to keep going until something flashes, or your infrastructure team start to squeal, or your SOC or whoever, that's super important. I've even seen tests, let's say the other side, we want to do a partnership with someone, and I say, hey, show me a pen test report. And they've basically ran like a Nessus scan, and it's like, this is wild.
Yeah, I'm never sure which is worse, when you just get the automated scan output, or whether you get we've done a pen test and there's 50 findings and it's all related to random technical vulnerabilities. I'm not disputing the vulnerabilities, but there's like no practical application for this, or very limited practical application. You think, so you've spent money on this and you've got nothing for it. And it's like, oh yeah, but we fixed them. And it's like, well, yeah, that's nice, but I have no faith that, beyond the obvious, I don't really have much more faith that you are more secure for the sake of having run this, this activity. I know you want, I know the dream state is we want this holistic security and compliance world and whatever, but just like focusing in on this bit sort of specifically is just, having an identification of, some super sophisticated attack or insider threat that's there is useful, but it's useful in a really limited way. And I think it's more, I think the claims internally and the sense of security we get from them as teams just need to marry up. And I find it the most annoying, I think, with the more transactional tests where it's your annual test of A, B, C, D. I think once you've got a good relationship with a good vendor, and you are actually doing, more red teamy style engagements on a more regular basis. And to your point there about, we'll just keep going until something flashes. I think that approach, even if you didn't have a specifically great scope lined out, at least you're testing a thing, right? But I'm just going to like basically do basic web app test or infrastructure test or something like that. And you're just thinking, well, I just find such limited value in it, but it's the thing that we all go to, right? As a security, as a sort of security professional, what's the easiest way to demonstrate that your product is secure is not actually by demonstrating all the great security stuff that you do, the integrated way you might work with your dev teams and all that stuff. Because when we've presented that to clients, they've been sort of, even if you put it in, the management speak and whatever, you can tell it's sort of confusing. You give them a pen test report with, we had 5 findings, now we've got 0. It's like, oh, great, fantastic, gold plated, locked down. And I find it a bit vexing. It's beginning to really annoy me, especially as well with continuous testing. Like, I just think that what we're saying for vulnerability scanning, what we're saying for the continuous red teaming kind of threat hunting type stuff is just not true. It's at best regular point in time assessments.
Yeah.
Sort of complemented by, pick your scanner of choice scan that runs at 1 a.m. every morning and tells you, oh, this has changed since whenever. You think there's not much going on here.
And then it creates like lots of confusion internally in your organization. It also pisses a lot of folk off, and it's like, again, we just fixed this, and it's like there's the tool's not had an adjustment or there's been an update. And personally, I like to see, like, if you have a good scope, obviously you define what you're wanting. I like the good, like, obviously when there's a finding, it kind of shows you where the finding is and ultimately how you fix it as well, right? So screenshots, obviously super important, or aspects of the code base that are exposed, or whether it's API. And then there's the kind of part where it's like, well, here's the attack surface. Here's what this person could do. I actually found that more interesting, because then you can go to someone, say, for instance, it's a development team or mobile team, and it's like, hey, there's actually this item here that's exposed, but this is where it can actually go. Just to let you know, it's been caught first. If we fix it, then that reduces the probability of something else happening. Yeah,
100%. I think that in itself is super valuable. I think the chances of getting that, I mean, I don't know how many vendors will watch this, but somebody should take that to their internal sales manager and be like, oh, I suggest we restructure our reports. Because the reports as well, I mean, I've worked for a couple of pen testing vendors in the past, and I think the reports are poorer now than ever before. It's just how many ways could I break your thing? Not are they likely to cause you any actual, if the scope was, hey, this is the target, blah, blah. What we're primarily concerned with is, loss of customer PII or something. It's never about, does it match to that? It's just, and it's useful to know other stuff is, could be configured better, but it's the entire test and the wrap-up calls with the testers, for me anyway, for the last kind of 18 months, I've sort of generally been, without 1 or 2 exceptions, these are all the fun technical things I did to break stuff, which is interesting as a person that's interested in that. But I very, very rarely, if ever now, can present them internally in a way that's meaningful, because it's either green light, you're fine, or here is some super obtuse thing that doesn't really mean much to anyone. And by the way, if it's in order to exploit it, you'd already have to be totally hosed. And it's like, well, to your point, how are we getting to this point? That's what I want to demonstrate. How do we get there? And then with the longer term slow burn engagements, whether it is the kind of red TV type stuff, what I'm finding quite often is there's not, I suppose in a way, it almost goes back to the practical application point you were making before, there's not the actual, when you run those engagements, I'm not finding the same consultants will have these super obtuse vulnerabilities, but then when you're running a bigger red team, they're not getting to the point of being able to get there, if you know what I mean. You've got to kind of let them in through the door. So that's my, I don't really know how to fix that, but that's my bugbear.
It almost feels like, obviously we won't name any pen testing companies. There could be a few that sponsor this at some point in future, but
I should have checked that.
there's been 1 or 2 that I've absolutely dropped the ball when, I've had a couple of companies where like it's just went in tangents where their internal staff, sales teams are copying you in emails. They forget, they're talking about what they're doing at the weekend. You're like, what is going on here? The madness that comes out of it. Probably one I'll tell you when we have a beer face to face. But it feels like it's being too led by salespeople rather than a product manager who looks at it like we are selling a service. What does the UI look like?
Yeah.
The UX, how can we then give feedback? I remember we worked with a company and we said, hey, we don't like these reports. They're horrible. Like, can you do this? Can you do that? Boom. They changed it to that format. And then we kept that format, which was then easier for people to follow, understand, instead of like, here's 5 pages of all the crest stuff. And I'm like, what the hell
Yeah,
is this?
nobody needs that. Well,
Here's the clients we work with. It's like, this is a nonsense.
You might want that on your onboarding phase, and you want to check the,
Totally.
when you're kicking the tires. But yeah, the our approach too is like, well, that should be self-evident in what I'm about to read. And as you say, a reference from Joe Blogs at large enterprise organization. You know what I mean? Well, thanks, but I'm not super interested.
I think if they thought about it more of a product rather than kind of, it feels like it's like a support kind of approach to take. But if it was more run like a product, then it would look a lot easier. And one report shouldn't be universal, so one report fits all. It should be tailored to your organization. And again, if I was running a pen testing company, that's what I would be looking at. Is like, you tell me what you need and we'll get it for you, and then do different iterations. And then like, it's kind of like the marketing gig, and it's like, oh, client likes this, okay, let's go with that format. That way it's easier for you to articulate internally. It covers all different flavors and it just makes life easier. But I guess unless you were going into the bug bounty program, where you actually have full-on engagements, obviously you can tailor reports. I know some of the stuff that HackerOne are doing is haven't used HackerOne in about a year, but some of the stuff they're doing now on the platform is really good and more tailored towards, I think, what we're kind of trying to talk about. And then you've got like Cobalt. Is it Cobalt.io?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've put a lot of investment in it. So I don't know, is that something that you would see as a preference as a bug bounty program rather than, hiring an MSP or somebody?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be kind of blunt about it, I've seen, we don't currently run one at Ampex, but when I've run them in the past, I've generally found more value from them, which is kind of interesting, right? Because it's, you've got your Crest accredited firm, and then obviously I appreciate just, it's not like it's a total Wild West, don't get me wrong, but you don't necessarily have some of that stuff with the bug bounty programs, but you're getting slightly more. You're always happy to pay the bounty, right? Sometimes the pen test bill, you think that's actually really annoying. I think
because it's literally, it's like their philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're getting people, that's all they do, maybe 10, 15 hours a day. They're just constantly looking for bugs, and they're genuinely invested in it. And I think that's probably where you get more information and more detail. But if anybody actually watches this episode, I'm interested to know what they say and their opinion on it, and any ideas that they could share to obviously help making things better with pen testing. But so what we'll do is we'll go on, Samuel, we'll go on to our last final question. The one thing in cyber you think is bullshit and needs focus on and needs to change?
Yeah, I think it's not total bullshit, but the talk at the moment around integrating AI into your security operations, the stuff you're trying to sell me, the stuff your team is doing, that is bullshit, and people should stop doing it. They've actually done it, and when they have actually done it, I'm fine with that. But you just haven't, and we all know it. I'm saying it.
I love it's. Lots of security professionals are feeling this right now, right? They're like, of course we want to automate as much as possible. It makes our life easier. It takes complex decision making away, also takes the element of politics away. But we use certain tools that are powered by LLM, and within our security tool stack, there's lots of automation which is AI led and generated, but thankfully we don't work with any vendors that are proclaiming these things that are like, this is going to fix everything, it's going to get rid of 5 FTE and all these kind of things. But there are others out there that are like, they're just kind of been infected by the marketing buzz. And I'm not saying that it's like it's it's not possible, but I think maybe I think people are maybe jumping on it too early and making these bold claims. And reality is, it's like, 18 months from now, maybe there's a good shout. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you bang right there. It's just a timing thing, right? I think vendors, I would be and am immediately skeptical when the claim is, if they're just, because some of them are just like open about it, right? They're like, we've got capability, we're excited about it, it's limited for now, but this is what we've got. And you think, right, fair dues. But when it's 2 points, silver bullet, this will solve all your problems. And by the way, we've developed something that's apparently more advanced than literally anything else anyone's ever heard of, then you sort of think, this is obviously clearly not true. And I think it's important as well with the adoption of, AI as it comes down the track for security professionals, to be honest with our staff, our, like C-suite, and the people that work at the organization we're working with, what the capability is, what we're actually doing, because ultimately we're going to get to where people are saying they are now, sooner rather than later. But it's kind of like, it's good to be excited, it's good to be into the technology, it's good to be getting fundamental understanding. But it's like, if we're pretending we're doing stuff we're not, I think you just, as a security function, you lose any credibility for other areas, because it's just, yeah, it's a funny one.
I definitely, and I think that's really important, is not only does the vendor articulate the limitations, because then you build trust. They're like, listen, doesn't do all of this, but this is that we're getting this close to it. Great, you're better than where we were a week ago. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then internally,
I'm still happy for that development, right? I'm still happy that I'm still pleased.
And internally, the limitations, it's imperative, because if people C-suite, or let's just say people make the big decisions in the organization, if they're led to believe that 100% AI, this and that, the next thing, then when it goes wrong, you're going to be the one that's going to cop it. Ultimately, you're going to be the one that's going to be like, well, I thought it was 100% this, but reality is it's only 10%, and I just lied because I needed the budget. Or
yeah, I just think it's and generally even non-technical stakeholders that I've engaged with, they've been really, if you can go to your team and say, hey, I reckon I can get 20% productivity gain by using Copilot or another solution, and you know what, we're still gonna do the key work of auditing and whatever the solutions that we're developing in house within the security team. Great, they're still pleased for that. You don't actually need to be like, my security team is fully AI-ified. I am now ahead of the technical curve, because then you end up seeing it in your company's pay statements, and you're thinking, ooh. And I think that's where some of this marketing buzz comes with the vendors, where you sort of think, it just doesn't make sense to pretend you're doing stuff you're not, or where the capability simply it might, let's be frank, it might exist, but you've not put it in your product yet. We all know you haven't. So
I know. I think everyone's caught up in the romance of it and the kind of spiral, but for me, it's kind of leading towards a black hole when you just get crushed eventually. But again, it's something that maybe we can catch up on, in a few months' time, and kind of see if it's still been a point of contention. Definitely.
Yeah.
But,
for what it's worth, I don't think that, not obviously not the technology itself, but I don't think that is going to change, because it's obviously driving like engagement for vendors, and then for internal security folk. The moment that you mention AI, data science, LLMs, you see you might be in a pretty boring risk meeting or whatever, and you sat there, and you've been listening to the HR risk, you've been listening to the finance, you get onto tech risks and whatever, and then you mention, oh yeah, we've solved this problem by slightly automating, or slightly using something that's powered by LLM, and you sort of see the interest pick up just by a couple of degrees or whatever. So people find it interesting enough that I don't think there's an incentive for people to stop. Unfortunately, just start bullshitting about it. I just wish they would, because then once you end up in a room and you chat to someone about it, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, as I say, we're fully, we've developed these in-house solutions, and we've embedded everything in and whatever. And you get chatting to them, and really all it comes down to is they've got the same kind of algorithmic capability that they did before. They've just rebranded it and are saying something different now, and you're like,
a different label. And it's funny, and there's also a kind of the mix mash of prompt engineering.
Yeah.
People, I was messing about with Party Rock, and I was like, I kind of made this Frankenstein tool, and I'm like, I just want to dump information on it, see what it can do, and I was sharing it with someone, and they were like, I don't get it, I don't know what it does. I'm like, and he's like, so where's the AI? I'm like, it's not AI, it's prompt
Yeah.
engineering. It's basically a couple of boxes where you dump some stuff, it's going to scan some files and tell you if it's got vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And also it works with LLMs and any kind of model. So if you dump a Python file in, it's good to go. But I need you to test it. He's like, but I only want to use it if it's AI. I'm like, it's not AI led.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
still going to help you. Still use it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, just remove it from your vocabulary. And it's, but anyway, it's what it is. So, right, okay, Samuel, we'll wrap up. Again, thanks very much for your time. And please, if anyone's watching this, give us some feedback, any comments. And then, yeah, thanks so much, everyone.